Welcome back. It's time for the Roundtable, and we've got lots of hot topics to discuss this week. The president bragging about the trade agreement he got with Congress, Hillary hitting the road and talking the economy. Plus, is the economy in a slump or headed for a rebound? Here to talk about all that and much more, two of our favorite regulars, Peter Morici, economist and professor at the University of Maryland's Smith School of Business, and Josh Boak, economics writer for the Associated Press. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Peter Morici, on Friday, the president had a press conference to brag about the trade agreement he got with Congress. It's not much, though. It's basically allowing him fast-track authority. What does it mean, and how is it going to be useful?
Well, the Senate has agreed to vote on it. He doesn't have it yet. Essentially, trade agreements today are terribly complex, but unlike treaties, they have to be passed by both houses of Congress because revenue is involved. And fast-track requires the Congress to vote up or down.
Puts
one
the legislation on a fast track. You can't amend it. You can't change it.
Right. You can play with the implementing legislation.
But this is crucial. I actually am old enough that I worked on international trade law in the Senate on the Finance Committee when we passed fast-track authority for NAFTA, and that was the deal maker or breaker. If the president got fast-track authority, then he basically got the NAFTA agreement. So it's early. The Senate's agreed to vote on it, but it's a big breakthrough.
If the Senate votes yes. The trouble is that the Korean Free Trade Agreement, which the president implemented, has doubled the trade deficit with Korea and has cost us 100,000 jobs, the opposite of what he promised. It's important to note that Chuck Schumer, the apparent new minority leader, has come out against this bill.
Josh, for conservative economists, Peter Morici is not the most free trade, multilateral kind of guy, let's face it. What's your take on a trade agreement and whether it's something that the president should be bragging about?
Well, I love bulgogi and all Korean food. So for me, the deal turned out perfect.
So it's a win.
But this is also about presidential authority fundamentally. Does the president have the ability and responsibility to interact with our foreign partners? After what we've seen with Iran, to some degree, fast-track trade authority is naturally going to be something that Obama wants from this particular Congress, and he can't help but count it as a win.
Let's just segue right to the thing Peter Morici's most exercised about this week, and that are all the various promises Hillary Clinton's making on the campaign trail. You basically complimented her in your column this week, saying that her rollout was a success, her video was a success, but that the GOP response, you said, is going to be a failure if they focus on social issues and don't respond to her take on the economy. But once again, you raised that specter of open trade borders. You said the way that the GOP needs to respond is by saying we're going to take on this international economy that's kicking the U.S. right where it counts.
Well, free trade makes sense if you export as much as you import. That's what the theory of free trade says that we teach on the blackboards. Unfortunately, we've got a $500 billion trade deficit, which costs us 4 million jobs. If the GOP is going to make a dent, they're going to have to talk about how do we get those 4 million jobs back. That would raise wages a lot for working class people, and that's something that Hillary's promised to address, but in another way.
Josh, come on, and feel free to interrupt me here, Peter. We're not a manufacturing economy. We're not ever going to once again export more than we import. But go back to 1987 and Paul Kennedy and the rise and fall of great nations, and look at what happens when you close your borders and you take that don't come after us, don't come after our markets mentality. This is where, you know how much I love Peter Morici, but I think he's totally wrong on this. You be the one to decide who's right, mommy or daddy.
Well, I'm going to go with you just because you dropped the Kennedy book, which I remember reading in 5th grade and loving.
Oh, that hurt. You read it in 5th grade.
On top of that, it's important to understand that politically, when we talk about the economy, Mitt Romney tried to use trade as a wedge issue in the Ohio race for presidency. And Ohio voters didn't buy it. Why? Because they now work at places like Honda. They've now seen what it's like working for foreign employers, and the numbers don't connect in an emotional way in the campaign as much as that personal grievance or that feeling.
I think you have to ask yourself, though, both of you, why does a majority of the president's party in Congress oppose this legislation?
He's up against the voters, not for what's good for the economy. Let's face it.
Well, if we want to talk about what's good for the economy, we've been doing this since the end of the Clinton period. And since that time, the economy has grown at less than 2% a year. We were much more hardball about trade during the Reagan and Clinton years, until, around 1998, and the economy grew at twice the pace. It's not a matter of throwing trade out the window. It's a matter of making sure that we compete on a level playing field.
So let's accept a compromise. Fast-track authority but you get to negotiate all the deals.
No.
We would never get it.
I gave you the compromise in my column, and that is do something about currency and do something about unfair trade. Those
That I
are
would agree
reasonable
with.
things. That's what Chuck Schumer wants. You have a rare moment here.
That
Peter
I agree.
Morisi is endorsing the policy of the Democratic leader in the Senate.
And a rare moment where I'm going to say, Peter, you know, on
Presumptive
those
Democratic
two fronts,
leader.
I totally agree with you. You're wearing a boot on your leg from a stress fracture, but actually people think it's because I kick you under the table when I disagree with you. I just say it loud and proud right here. Josh spoke. We've only got 30 seconds. We want to talk about economic recovery, but it's one of the issues is coming down to, can't get too into detail, but housing is one fundamental issue. You say when people are having to rent out parts of their home just to make the mortgage, it's not a good sign for the economy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Incomes have not kept pace with housing prices. And when home prices increase, people are not able to afford as much. And we're starting to see that in particular in the D.C. area from people I'm talking to.
Peter, the job market is picking back up again. Oil prices are low, but consumer confidence is lousy. The consumer price index is not good news. The first quarter of the economy slumped, and now people are saying, was that just a one-off, or are we going to see a recovery here?
We're going to have a second quarter recovery, but it's not going to be as robust as the Federal Reserve has hoped. Unfortunately for the Fed, inflation is starting to pick up again. So they're really going to be between a rock and a hard place about interest rates. It's going to be a very interesting drama this summer for us to talk about Janet Yellen and interest rates.
Which they won't raise, I don't think, this summer like they had hoped.
I did
Okay.
not see it in the Star Wars trailer. No interest rate hike
And if
in
it's not
there.
in the Star Wars trailer this week, then it doesn't count for anything. We've got a pop quiz when we come back. Welcome back. It's time for the pop quiz. Who am I to launch a pop quiz on a guy who read Paul Kennedy's Rise and Fall of Great Nations in fifth grade? But here we go. We're back with Josh Boak and Peter Morisi. So here it is, Josh Boak. We've just been talking weak economic first quarter, second quarter looking tepid. I want you to project into the third quarter. Are we going to see some strength, or are we going to see some malaise?
I personally am starting to feel like malaise, but if we see strength, it's going to have to come from consumers. The problem right now is that consumers are not spending their gains from lower gasoline and oil prices.
Peter, this is your forte. Give us a projection. Strength in the third quarter or more malaise?
The economy will grow somewhere between 2.5 and 3% in the third quarter and thereafter, which is more than we've had so far in this recovery. Consumers are in a better place than they were 5 years ago. Most people are in a better place than they were 5 years ago, and the economy will reflect it. It won't be spectacular, but it'll be better.
You heard it here. I like precision. We can hold them to it. Thanks for joining us.